Wano country was fabled as the land of the swordsmen, yet this turned out to be rather misleading. When the Straw Hats got to Wano, Zoro was arguably already the strongest swordsman in the country, and his final fight in the arc was not against a samurai, or even a swordsman. In fact, in all of post-time skip, Zoro has yet to have a single challenging sword fight. This could however all change in Elbaf, where Zoro could encounter his most difficult fight in the story to date. As weird as it may sound, it is actually possible that Elbaf, not Wano, is the home of the strongest swordsman in One Piece. While this may sound crazy to some of you, a few things in the story actually indicate that Elbaf might have overtaken Wano as the country of the strongest swordsmen. The reputation of Wano's samurai was arguably not so much inaccurate, as it was out of date. We know that Wano in the past has produced some of the strongest swordsmen in the story, such as Ryuma and Kosuke Oden, as well as forging some of the strongest blades, including all of Zoro's very own swords. This was however all in the past. The reason why Zoro did not find a worthy challenge in Wano was because of the actions of Kaido and the Beast Pirates. After occupying Wano, Kaido either killed or imprisoned the country's strongest swordsmen, with the pirates under his command overtaking the samurai as Wano's main military force. Because of Kaido, Wano arguably lost its status as the land of the strongest swordsmen in the past 20 years. It is possible that the country that filled this vacuum, and the current land of the strongest swordsman in One Piece, is actually none other than Elbaf. This is actually a pretty natural conclusion to make. This is because Elbaf is already known by the far grander title, the strongest nation in the world. Elbaf's warriors are apparently so strong that Big Mom actually thought that, had they allied with her, she could have defeated all of the other Yonko and become the Pirate King. This statement is even bigger when we consider two things about it. One is that Big Mom is in control of a huge information network, meaning that the prospect of Elbaf's giants being this strong could actually be very accurate, and not just a random guess. The second thing is that Big Mom is talking about her alliance with Elbaf happening years in the past, meaning that she thought that her and the giants could have potentially beaten Whitebeard, even before he got sick. No country in the One Piece story has received this level of build-up for their warriors, and even though we've never seen them, it's genuinely possible that some of the absolute strongest characters in the story live on Elbaf. This however is still a separate topic from there also being strong swordsmen in Elbaf. Or is it? While the giants in the story have been seen wielding a variety of different weapons, there is an argument that swordplay is a very important part of their culture. We've seen that several of Elbaf's warriors are actually swordsmen, including captains like Dory and Jarl. This makes a lot of sense, as Elbaf is heavily inspired by medieval Norse kingdoms. While perhaps not as famous for using swords as the real-life Japanese bushi, swords were still an important part of Scandinavian martial culture. Due to swords being harder to make than other weapons like spears or clubs, among Viking raiders, only the most influential warriors wielded swords. Because of their value, swords in Scandinavia also held a lot of spiritual significance. While Thor's Mjolnir hammer or Odin's Gungnir spear may be the most famous weapons from Norse lore, several legendary swords also appear in their mythology. The sword Gram was used by a legendary hero called Sigurd, which he used to slay a dragon. Turfing was a sword forged by the dwarves, but it also bore a curse where its wielder had to kill a man every time the sword was drawn. Many of the gods from the Norse pantheon also wielded swords, such as Heimdall, the guardian of Asgard, who is said to have wielded the sword Hofund, which he actually used when confronting Loki during Ragnarok. If Elbaf is based on the medieval Norse kingdoms just like Wano was based on Japan, it is very possible that One Piece will also depict Elbaf's warriors as being very strong swordsmen, because of this history and mythology. However, to make it clear, inspiration is only ever just inspiration in One Piece, where some things from real life are included, while other things are left out, meaning there are no guarantees that the story will actually include this particular aspect of Norse culture in Elbaf. It could be that Elbaf will be just like a lot of vast countries the Straw Hats have visited, where there will be some strong swordsmen, but nothing out of the ordinary. While I cannot predict what will happen in the manga, in this next part of the video, I will make my case why there should be a strong swordsman in Elbaf, and why it would be better for the story if Zoro actually did get a challenging sword fight in the arc. The crux of this argument is because of one man, Dracule Mihawk. The One Piece story is currently in its final saga, and it is very likely that Zoro's duel with Mihawk will happen at some point in the near future. This brings up the question, would it feel earned for Zoro to be able to beat Mihawk at this point in the story? My personal answer is no. Zoro is arguably still far below Mihawk's level, where Zoro's best win is against the right-hand man of a Yonko, while Mihawk's power in the story is compared to the Yonko themselves. While One Piece has a lot of plot-induced power-ups, Zoro beating Mihawk without him having genuinely worked for it would probably be very bad for the story. Becoming the world's strongest swordsman is Zoro's life goal, and he's arguably fought all of his fights in the series, at least partly, to get him closer to achieving this goal. From the standpoint of what would make for a more interesting story, this is a fairly simple situation. If and when Zoro finally has his rematch with Mihawk, the more work Zoro has put into finally reaching Mihawk's level throughout the series, the fight and Zoro achieving his dream will feel that much more earned. This is where we come to the problem that was brought up before, where Zoro in the post-time skip has arguably not had to work that hard to become a stronger swordsman. Outside of Zoro's fights at Onigashima, he's faced very little challenges in the new world, and has yet to defeat any high-level swordsman in a fight. A simple solution to this problem would be for Zoro to get to fight against other strong swordsmen before Mihawk in the final saga. Even though it's probably not the first place fans would think of, Elbaf could be the island where Zoro would find this challenge, considering what we know about the giants and their real-life inspiration. We've also arguably seen this reflected in the story, where many of Elbaf's warriors that we've encountered are in fact swordsmen, as brought up before. Let's say this video's idea does actually happen, and Elbaf ends up being an arc where Zoro faces off against a really strong swordsman and experiences a lot of growth. A question that some of you could think of is, would Zoro fighting a giant in a sword fight even work in practice? Zoro is fairly short as far as One Piece characters go, and can't gigantify himself like some of his other crewmates. I personally first thought that a swordsman like Zoro fighting a giant could look rather awkward, but after a bit of thinking, I realized that the manga is actually full of fights where Zoro faces off against massive opponents. In fact, Zoro has already fought multiple giants in the past. The first time was during the Long Ring Longland arc, where Zoro fought Big Pan, who was a giant fishman hybrid in the Foxy Pirates. During Thriller Bark, Zoro with the rest of the crew also faced off against Oars, who was actually much larger than regular giants, due to him being an ancient giant. Zoro's track record of battling giant enemies however goes much deeper. Particularly in the post-time skip, Zoro's opponents only grow bigger and bigger. These include Tsurume the Kraken during Fishman Island, Vegapunk's dragon during Punk Hazard, Pika during Dressrosa, and Kaido in his dragon form during Wano. In light of all of this, a full fight between Zoro and a giant on Elbaf could actually look surprisingly good, as the manga has a long history of drawing Zoro's fighting style against these kinds of massive opponents. Another opportunity for the story with making one of Elbaf's warriors into a strong swordsman could be to introduce another Supreme Great Blade. There are 12 Supreme Great Blades in the world, and we currently know less than half of them. As these are weapons wielded by some of the strongest characters in the world, it could actually make sense that one or more of them are found in the strongest nation in the world. As a Supreme Grade is the same grade as Mihawk's blade, Zoro facing an opponent who uses that kind of sword could be a very good stepping stone for him. Unfortunately for Zoro though, he would probably not be able to claim any Supreme Grade swords he could find in Elbaf. This is because the weapons the giants wield are absolutely massive, and likely far too cumbersome for someone like Zoro to use. As a fun observation though, Enma also seemingly shrank in size when Zoro used it, compared to how huge it was when Oden used it. On the topic of Elbaf, even if Zoro doesn't get a new sword during the arc, he could still get something else from the giants. While the crew is in Elbaf, Zoro could actually learn some of the giants' fighting techniques. As demonstrated by Big Mom, the giants' abilities can actually be learned and used by humans. Zoro also has shown that he is able to learn other fighters' special abilities, as seen with him using Kinemon's Foxfire style. Zoro learning something like the Hakoku techniques could actually fit well into his fighting style, as we've seen him perform similar sword skills in the past. If Zoro were to become the strongest swordsman in the world in the future, it would also be interesting if he was also a master of several styles of sword fighting from all over the world. One final thing I'd like to bring up is that Elbaf being an important arc for Zoro also would not have to take anything away from the other Straw Hats. Characters like Usopp and Robin have a lot of setup for Elbaf, and these can well coexist with Zoro also getting focus in the arc. While there aren't a lot of expectations for Zoro relating to Elbaf, one thing I've learned in the years that I've kept up to One Piece is that it can often be very surprising which characters actually end up getting focus in which arc. I was certainly very surprised that, of all of the post-time skip arcs, the one where Frankie got the most focus was during Dressrosa, instead of, for example, Egghead. Likewise, I did not expect Sanji to get so much material in Wano, after he'd just been the central Straw Hat during Whole Cake Island. This video isn't meant to guarantee that Zoro will end up being a central character during Elbaf, but it's more so a discussion on the potential if the story were to take this route. If you like this video, you might also like my video on who could actually end up being the main villain of the upcoming Elbaf arc, which I've just uploaded on the channel. Other than that, thanks a lot for watching this video to the end.